Bailey. In addition to being our Victims Assistance Coordinator here in Rusk County, he is also a Baptist minister. And I'm going to ask him to come forward and say a prayer to start our proceedings here today.
Let's bow our heads together, please. Almighty Father, we're so thankful for your great love for us, for your goodness to us, for your mercy toward us. And Father, in this hour, I pray that you would be with the families of those who were taken through this hideous crime that was committed all those years ago. I pray that you would give them peace and that you would give them comfort and you would help them to find closure in the new facts that have come to light. Almighty God, we thank you for those who support and protect those of us in the community, for our law enforcement officers, our prosecutors. Lord, I just pray that you would guide and overlook this proceeding here today. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Day and every day since September 23rd, 1983 should be about honoring the victims who were cruelly taken away from their families. So as I read the names of those victims, I'm going to ask their families who are present here to stand there. We had a meeting last night in Kilgore PD. They were good enough to provide us their council chambers over there and had more victims' families there, but we have a well-representative group here. Monty Landers, thank you. David Maxwell, Mary Tyler, Opie Hughes, and Joey Johnson. Thank you. Evil reached behind the pine curtain and gripped us here in the Bible Belt in a tangible way on September 24th of 1983, when those bodies were discovered. Texans, especially East Texans, forever remember where they were when they heard that story because it marked the end of our innocence. There's no way to acknowledge everyone who has contributed to this investigation from the very start all the way up to date. Yet I must try as we gather here today. So first, we've acknowledged the families because their demand for justice to honor their loved ones is the primary reason we gather here today. Instead of false narratives, unfounded allegations of incompetence, or worse, the inevitable finger-pointing that comes from the confluence of so many different agencies, permit me a moment to highlight those men and women who conducted themselves to the high, and continue to conduct themselves to the highest standards of our profession by introducing some of them to you. Behind me here, Danny Pirtle. He was the original lead detective from Kilgore PD, and he later went on to a distinguished career, retiring as the sheriff of Rusk County, Texas. Currently representing those agencies, we have some representatives from Kilgore PD here today. Chief Hunter was with us last night with the victims' families, but he couldn't be here today, but he's got his assistant chief and his staff here, and we appreciate them. And our Sheriff of Rusk County, Texas, Mr. John Wayne Valdez, is seated right behind me. In addition, we have former Kilgore PD and current Gregg County Sheriff, Maxie Serliano, right here, and seated next to him is Sheriff Larry Smith of Smith County. We're honored to have them all today. We also have Sheriff Corbel from Shelby County and his chief deputy, and we have Dee Dee Green, who is a district clerk there. I'm going to introduce some of these other folks as we go along. William Brown was the DA's investigator for 37 years, including back in September of 1983. I was honored to have him on my watch for about a third of his tenure. William's here. And George Keeney is right behind me, a little bit more difficult to see. George, was in this investigation for a very, very long time, and we appreciate him. And it's my privilege, really, to introduce a hero to those of us who are involved in this investigation, unsung hero. She's a woman of science. Her career spans the entire length of this investigation. She only retired very recently. She worked the original case. Then at the dawn of the 21st century, she went back and she got that napkin and box lid that had been in evidence there at the lab for all of those many, many years, 2 decades at that time. And she developed the DNA profiles from the napkin and the box lid recovered from inside the restaurant. And that eventually led to those convictions of Darnell Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton. Lorna Beasley's here with us today. In a moment, Lisa Tanner will tell you a lot about this case, and she'll reveal to you the identity of this third perpetrator known through biological evidence and DNA. And I won't go into detail at this time her tremendous contribution, or Missy Wolf's, who's worked with her so closely. The great contribution from the Ranger Service over the many, many years. That a lot of Rangers have worked this case from Sturt Dow forward. We have our Saki Grant Ranger, which is our sexual assault kit investigative ranger. He's on a grant through the federal government, and we know that unfortunately everything, including obtaining justice, can be expensive, so we're grateful for those grant opportunities and those resources that are brought to bear. The Rangers have certainly devoted a great number of those, and Ranger Jason Shea is a large part of why we're here today. So we've got Ranger Jason Shea with us, and then seated next to him is Ranger Hamadi, who has also been running down some leads in regard to this case. I also want to acknowledge a Ranger who's not here, the late Ranger Glenn Elliott. And, he's known as a Ranger's Ranger because he really devoted himself to improving his craft. He became a leader in blood spatter technology in Texas, early leader, taught the classes, and in fact, that's why the blood that he saw in the restaurant stuck out and struck a chord with him, and he remembered it in detail all those many years later, seeing it in the early morning hours of September 24th of 1983. Ranger Elliott also kept a complete copy of his papers, including the wanted poster after the DNA hits came back on Darnell Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton. They started looking for those names, and they found from Ranger Elliott's notes, Lisa Tanner and Missy Wolf were able to uncover in his house that he actually had a wanted poster with both their names and both their Polaroid pictures on it, developed the very first week after the robberies and murders. So we owe a lot to him. His testimony was crucial. There were so many obstacles from the start in regard to this investigation because of some cost-cutting measures instituted in 1983 over in the city of Kilgore, and that's all different now. But at that time, the city was developing the rolls of film and canistering them, and what happened was, despite Investigator Purtle and all the other best efforts of them well photographing the crime scene, out of, I believe, over a dozen rolls, only one of them actually developed into pictures. So they had some difficulties from the start. At autopsy, fingernail fell from the belt loop of one of the victims, and despite another victim missing part of her nail, the pathologist, to her credit, later admitted her mistake. She mistakenly picked that up and thought, well, that doesn't match, that must be from a perpetrator, and that sent us down a very lengthy wrong path. It was 2 decades of wasted resources from that, and then of course disproving it. And it led to a false narrative of corruption and cover-up, and that failed search for that fingernail gave rise to a story so enthralling, many people find that fiction much more compelling than the truth that brings us here today, and they just won't abandon it. And I'm appealing to those folks to hear the truth today. Also want to introduce, we've got some dignitaries on hand, and I appreciate them, too many to name, and once I start, I'll probably leave somebody out. So I've mentioned a lot of law enforcement folks. But in addition to all of that, we've got our county court law judge here, Chad Dean. We've got liaison investigator Craig Sweeney, current investigator. We've got our district clerk, Terry Purtle Willard, and seated behind her, Randy Galler, Precinct 1 commissioner. And we've got our county clerk, Trudy McGill, right behind Trudy, I'm sorry, behind her. And then in addition to that, back here in the back of the room, we've got our constable, Jesse Stewart, is present with us. We've got our JP5 judge, Judge Henlow, and y'all help me if I've lost anybody, because I want to recognize y'all so that, which one? Oh, I'm sorry, Pat McCory. Now, you know why I overlooked Pat? Pat, bless his heart, Pat has helped us over the years with different leagues that we've investigated, and Pat was here at noon for this press conference. So I'm sorry I overlooked you, Judge. We appreciate you being here. Okay, anybody else? Thank you, Angela.
She's from Joanne Shopler's office.
Oh, I'm sorry, Misty Nixon, right? She is the aide to Joanne Schaffner and her chief, I believe, here in the district, and we appreciate Representative Schaffner. I mention that because y'all honor the victims by being here, and in addition to that, over the years, from time to time, it has really taken, some people have had to weigh in. Some senators have had to weigh in before to get the resources that were necessary to continue the investigation. So I did want to honor all of y'all. So thank you, and thank you to all those county officials who are out on hand, and all of you have answered, on my tenure, have answered the call that duty demanded. We can't control what crimes occur within the geographical limitations of Rusk County, Texas, because of a broken world. But what we can do as Rusk County citizens, the citizens of the state of Texas, uphold our sworn duty to do justice to the people of Texas and to the families of our citizens. Now soon I'm going to introduce Lisa Tanner. She's going to summarize for you the current convictions that are standing in the place. She's going to explain the forensics behind those and the science that identifies a third individual and brings us here today. Thereafter, after she completes her presentation, I'm going to return back up here and I'm going to go through a packet of documents that we prepared for the press because, and I'll address why I'm going to do that. That's what we deem to be appropriate and public for public record, so that we wouldn't have to address each one of those specifically at a later time. When I took office 20 years ago, 21 now, our current governor, Greg Abbott, was Attorney General. And when the grand jury returned the true bills for Romeo Pinkerton and Darnell Hartsfield, right outside these windows on the front steps, he joined us there, and he proclaimed at that time that we would see the prosecution of these individuals through. I was next to him, and Lisa Tanner was already next to us, and as part of his commitment to do that, he assigned us a very accomplished prosecutor to lead the team. She'd go on to a lot greater renown, have a lot more trials. Her and I would partner many other times over the years, but her partnerships in the courtrooms, from here to New Boston and to Bryan, Texas, to Conroe, it's been the greatest honor of my professional career, the greatest professional association I've had. Now, she's since left the Attorney General's office. Yet she remains steadfast in her commitment to justice in this case, as well as her duty as a prosecutor, because we can actually claim her as our own assistant district attorney, a title she's held ever since step one of her involvement in this case. So I'm going to turn this over for Lisa's presentation and let her address some matters with you. Would y'all please help me welcome Lisa Tanner, lead prosecutor on our case.
It has been the professional honor of my life to stand in front of 3 separate juries in 3 separate counties to talk to them about this case. It is the greatest privilege of my career, and this will always be the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I'm going to tell you the same thing I told each of those juries in 2005, 2007, and 2008. And that is that this case, if you boil it down to its simplest form, the evidence has been there all along. It has been there since September 23rd of 1983, and it has been waiting. The evidence was always waiting for the science and the technology to catch up with it so that it could give us the answers that it held within it. And all the way through these last 42 years, this case has flowed through the advances in technology and the answers that that has provided to us. That started all the way back in 1995 when we were able to enlist, at a great deal of difficulty, we're able to enlist the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology in Washington, D.C. to take on this case. And they took this case on at the very beginning of the most advanced DNA testing that was available in this world. And they submitted that fingernail that we all know about to DNA testing. And they were able to tell us that that fingernail did not match a suspect, any suspect, and it matched one of the victims. That obviously caused a hard right turn and changed the complete tenor of this case, but that technology allowed us to avoid a potential miscarriage of justice. And we should all be thankful for that. But that wasn't the end of things, because in 2007, we re-enlisted that same laboratory in Washington, D.C. to use even more advanced DNA technology on that same fingernail, and they came back and gave us even more definitive proof that it was the fingernail of Mary Tyler. And it was not that of the suspect, and that was not where we needed to be going. Well, at that point, the case, after the 1995 determination, the case kind of went cold, I guess is the best way to put it, until the DNA technology advanced further. And that was in 2001, when the DNA database, the offender database, the acronym being CODIS, came online, and with the help of Lorna and the help of George Keeney and others who worked on this case, we were able to determine that there was blood inside the Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant that did not match any of the 5 victims, and it matched, as it turned out from the CODIS database, Darnell Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton. That was in 2001 and 2002. As a result of that advancement with technology, we were able to go back and look and determine that they were in fact the prime suspects from the very beginning. And they were later, as you know, convicted. Romeo Pinkerton pled guilty in 2007. He had made a judicial confession that he was one of the people responsible for Kentucky Fried Chicken murders. And then later in 2008, Darnell Hartsfield was convicted because of those advances in technology. But in the interim, there was another issue that came up. And you've heard bits and pieces about why we're here, but I'll tell you a little bit more about it. In 2003, my investigators working with me, Missy Wolf and Forrest Mitchell, and I were here in the Rusk County Sheriff's Office, and we were looking at physical evidence. And we were trying to make some determinations from the physical evidence, and it was then that we learned that there was another DNA sample that nobody knew about that had never been discovered. And that was a DNA sample on the clothing of one of the victims. And we learned that it was not matching any of the previous suspects. We learned that in 2003, and we kept it under wraps as we then tried to figure out whose it was. And I will tell you, you just can't make this stuff up when you're talking about this case. On September 23rd of 2003, the 20th anniversary of this crime, we received a call from Lorna Measley from the lab who said, that DNA doesn't match any of your suspects. And I will tell you, we fully intended to indict Darnell Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton on that day before we got that phone call. And then we stopped because we knew we needed more technology. And we went to work. We tried to figure out who that DNA belonged to. We have, since that time, excluded 231 suspects to no avail. And we continued to work, and we continued to hope that the science would get better. We eventually got the science to the point where we knew that the person who left that sample was primarily of African-American descent, which was Mr. Pinkerton and Mr. Hartsfield, and not the previous set of suspects from the fingernail, and then we proceeded to trial. All along knowing someday we want to find out whose DNA that was. And we kept testing as much as we could, but we had to be very, very, very careful because we were talking about a very, very old sample. We were talking about not a huge sample, and we had to make sure that we didn't use it all up. Because we didn't want to use it all up with decent technology and then find out later there was better technology that would have given us the answers. So we waited for the technology. This past year, the Texas Rangers came in to help us. The Texas Rangers have a grant called the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, the acronym being SAKI, grant so that they can look at older unsolved cases. And we will forever, and I say this on my behalf, on Michael's behalf, and on behalf of our friends, the family that are over in the jury box, we will forever be grateful that they took the lead, and the Rangers took the lead to do genealogy testing on that DNA sample from the pants of our victim of abuse. That started this past year, and we have been in touch with the Rangers for this past year, and 2 weeks ago, we learned that they had narrowed it down through a variety of genealogical databases that y'all don't want me to explain it all to you, and I don't really want to have to explain it all to you because I am a lawyer because I don't do science. But there are genealogical databases that allow the Rangers to narrow this down to the DNA of one of 3 brothers. Over these past several weeks, there have been trips to California. There have been a great deal of work that has been done. And in the last 2 days, we've been able to narrow it down and confirm, or maybe the last week, but we've been able to confirm that the DNA is that of a man by the name of Devin Riggs. He was born on February 2nd of 1953, and he died on October 8th of 2010. So he is no longer with us, so we will not be having another Kentucky Fried Chicken murders trial because of that, but at least now we know. I'm going to let Mike tell you more about Mr. Riggs' background, but that has been something that has, those of us who know this case and work this case, has gnawed at us and gnawed at us. I will tell you that it has gnawed at me since I've learned of it, because I thought, how in the world did we miss him? We've eliminated 231 people. How did we miss this guy? I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, it's important before we get into the specifics about Mr. Riggs to tell you that we know he was in this area around the time of these murders. We know that because he was arrested on November 13th of 1983, just over in Shelby County, for an attempted murder that he went to prison for. And that occurred right then. So we know he was in this area around that period of time. What we've learned since the investigation is that immediately upon getting out of prison in around 1985 or so, Mr. Riggs left Texas and he went to California. And he spent the remainder of his years in California, so he was not on our radar screen because of that. Secondly, his offense here in Texas goes back to showing you how things were so different back then. That would have put him into the database had he committed that crime in recent years. There was no database back then, so he was not in our DNA database here in Texas. Additionally, Michael will tell you more about his background back then, or excuse me, once he moved to California, and none of the offenses for which he was convicted or arrested in California put him into their database. He was in no database anywhere. So that is, I think, why he didn't get onto our radar screen over all of these last 12 years. But now we know it's him. They have excluded his 2 brothers. There was one brother who died before the Kentucky Fried Chicken murders. But we now know that based on genealogy testing, that is our 3rd suspect. So yet again, we've gotten to the point where the forensics has advanced enough, where the evidence has finally answered the biggest question we've had, who that last person is. And we still have some work to do. I'll let Michael tell you more about it, and I'll certainly answer any more questions about all of this evidence. And if there's anything I missed, please let me know, Mike. But from there, I'm going to let him tell you more about Mr. Riggs.
I'll share with you what we've been able to determine about Mr. Riggs, and we're still investigating that. There's a lot of the men and women behind me are still working on that. However, we wanted to go ahead and proceed now because we wanted to make sure as word might slowly get out that these families heard first, and that's why we met with them last night. And actually, Lisa's been in constant contact with them throughout the process. And so we wanted to address that really before the holiday season started. So there's more work to do. But having told you that, I'm also going to furnish to anybody from the media who wants one of these little data devices. And it's got what information we do know now. The reason I'm doing that is because we're a very small office, as you know, and we'll be inundated with all the open records requests. Plus, these cases never end anymore. So as long as somebody who is convicted is alive, we anticipate they will file writs, and actually from practice we know that they will file writs. So because of that, I can't just release everything carte blanche. So we have made a list of what we believe that we can release, and let me start going through that with you. I'll put it up over my shoulder here. This is a summary of Mr. Riggs' criminal history. It really wouldn't be appropriate to give you his criminal history under Texas law, but you can see here he's arrested for burglary in Los Angeles in 1970 on 2 different occasions. After that, robbery in Los Angeles and Inglewood, California, which is near the same area. We've got the loitering in the school area. We've got attempted murder and robbery in 71. By 72 in Sacramento, we've got a robbery and assault. In 76, he goes to prison in California for 5 years to life. But then he's paroled in 1977. Of course, we've got the murders in this instant case in September 23rd of 1983. And then thereafter in Shelby County, about 7.5 weeks later, we have the attempted murder and burglary, which we were able to get a copy of the newspaper account. Ranger Shea was able to furnish one from the Longview News Journal at that time, but we also got one from the Shelby County newspaper there in the center that recites that he ended up shooting his brother just as Ms. Tanner told you about. And really what's instrumental about Sheriff Corbel being here today is Sheriff Corbel was a trooper at the time, obviously before he took office, and he ended up, like in most rural counties, where he ends up responding, and he worked that case. So it just we've been so blessed by so many things that went our way. In addition to all the things that didn't go our way, I just happened to be down there trying to get information and was really getting a dead end, and the sheriff overheard me, and he immediately came up and told me all I ever wanted to know at that time that I could handle about Billy Ray Riggs and Devin Riggs. And originally what we had, and you'll see from this as well, is that we had the genealogy through Ranger Shea's work narrowed it down to 3 full brothers, these Riggs brothers, Larry Riggs, Billy Ray Riggs, and Gerald Riggs, and Devin Riggs, I'm sorry. And so we know now it was Devin. Now, thereafter, you see, right after he gets sentenced to 3 years, actually what he went away on was aggravated assault, but he was initially charged with attempted murder. He leaves TDC in 1984, and he's paroled, but pretty quickly he's out in Los Angeles. He commits a battery in 1996, and then he's formally discharged, and then he's deceased in 2010. Now, also included Billy Ray Riggs, that is the person that he shot. They were living together down there in Timpson, and we do know some other people who were living in the residence with him. And when the sheriff went down there at that time, trooper, it was pretty easy to figure out that there was no actual hunting accident, as Billy told the Nacogdoches Hospital. He was actually shot as a result of the 2 of them having a shootout, and a number of shots were exchanged, I believe over 15. The sheriff worked that case, and while he was down there, he was noticing in the yard a whole bunch of shells of vehicles, including a van, cargo van. And so because of that, he went back and got a warrant. He came back and searched and went through all of those stolen goods, and it was just full of stolen goods, as you can see from from Billy Ray's. Then Billy Ray, well, a while after this, he ends up in 1990, we discovered that he is the subject of a number of documentaries and things where he killed a woman out there in California and was eventually convicted of that. And so this is just a copy here of that original shooting, like 7.5 weeks after these murders, from the newspaper there in the center. These are the bookend pages that the sheriff provided me. Very helpful, because that gave us some leads to go to other people we could try to track down to try to find more information about Devin Riggs. And I asked the sheriff about a photo, because we still had not seen a photo of him at that time, since we found one with his pin packet that we'll show you here in a minute. But the sheriff pointed out to me, as we all forget, about it was 1983. As she said, it doesn't go in these databases because there wasn't any DNA science to collect that. But he pointed out to me it probably would have been a Polaroid, and it would have been attached to it, and it's probably fallen off. But as a result of that, we got enough information to go over to the district clerk, Ms. Green, who's here, and she took a lot of her time, and she went and found us some files, and so we got the full file from that shooting incident that we included here. Now this is the actual pin packet from that conviction. This is Devin Riggs. This is the photo we got of him from his pin packet, and she was able to get us that full court file. And then when she got us that full court file, in addition to that, this is just a copy of what I was telling you about a minute ago, where that case where Billy Ray Riggs was convicted out in California. I'm going to run through it, because when we went, the district clerk Green got us that court file, we found something that each county is a little bit different. And we normally wouldn't put the confession of the subject in when we had a conviction, but here they had the confession of Billy Ray Riggs, because I told you the sheriff went back down there with a warrant and went through all that stolen stuff. There's a great amount of stolen stuff, and Billy Ray Riggs gave him a confession, and Billy Ray Riggs talks about how him and Devin committed a number of burglaries, how they broke into a building belonging to a local resident there outside of Timpson. They broke into their toolboxes, or construction companies, what it appeared to be, and that he took a Colt .357 revolver. The last time he saw that gun, Devin had it. Of course, you know from the KFC cases that's the general class of weapon that could have been used here. And then he talks about in May of 1983, back before these murders, how Devin and him drove to Marshall, and they went to a shopping center up there and stole a van. And then in addition to that, they went to a football game in Jacksonville, and they stole another van there. So we all obviously believe the cargo van was used. As some witnesses involved with that. They stole some other things, and what was difficult too was that they, this is that statement I was telling you about, is of course they're stealing all these things in Timpson and Shelby County. It's a small county. It's hard for them to move those items down there. So what they end up doing is he recites that they ended up going all over. They went to Dallas, to Houston, to Shreveport, to Jacksonville, purportedly in an attempt to find Volkswagen parts, but clearly they were trying to move some of this stolen merchandise that they were stealing. So we've got him all over the East Texas area during this period of time. These are their court files that we have from down there as well. Now, in addition to that, in the back of this packet, we also, somewhere in here, is the card from the investigator out in Inglewood who came out and was looking at Billy Ray's file after that murder. We've also got the emails where we redacted some of the names in the emails, but it gives you a hint of all the work that Ranger Shea and the Ranger Service did, because when they get this back, that it's going to be one of these three brothers, well, actually, the full brothers of Billy Riggs, they start going down that path. One of the brothers was deceased before this. Larry and Devin and Billy Ray were all alive at the time of this, so they start them, and they were able to get some DNA from Billy Ray's, from a medical examiner when he died. They're all deceased now. And then Larry, they were able to get a relative. We blacked out those names that were used there to try to protect those people who are innocent, other than they just are related to these individuals. And you can see by the process of elimination that what we end up with is, when I get to it here in a minute, that's just reciting that Devin has passed away in 2010 from natural causes there in Los Angeles. And this is when the Rangers sent us the actual email where he says Devin Riggs is a person. And he's asked to do the comparison. And he's talking about from Bodie Labs up in Virginia. They've been instrumental in all of this. And he talks about we're going to proceed to the next step. Now, the next step, the Rangers suggested that I contact Mr. Pinkerton. Wouldn't be appropriate because he's got an attorney who is there to advise him about writs and other matters. So I did contact the attorney. And essentially, I told him we're not going to make any sort of agreement. He's got 5 life sentences. He deserves every day of it. However, if he were willing to provide the victims what comfort it might provide and address these matters with us, I would be hard-pressed not to admit before a parole board that he had told the truth. He declined that request. So we did pursue that avenue. We tried to pursue a number of avenues. And I've got that recited in there, and there's the original list that we got. Now, in addition to that, we do have, just a little short, there's another press release today reciting what Ms. Tanner told you, and then we've got the actual Bodie Labs report that we've redacted some of, but the pertinent part is in there. It's a little bit difficult to read because that's the kind of science that is. I mean, the nature of DNA is they're matches, but they're matches by exclusion. However, all of us up here have become very proficient in this, and we represent to you that there is no doubt, there's no doubt today that Devin Riggs has his biological material, that semen from one of the victim's pants, and we're certain enough that we're absolutely certain he would be convicted if he were alive and could be tried. Now, we are going to take questions in just a moment, but what I'm going to ask is if the victims' families, if they want to go ahead and leave, I'm going to go ahead and let them leave if they want to. If they want to stay, if they want to participate and answer questions, they can. But if they want to go ahead and leave, I'm going to give them that opportunity right now with Bruce, our victims coordinator. And as I said, we'll pass these out at the end of this process. So respectfully, don't bother sending me open record requests. I'll object to turn over anything other than this because we expect that we might very well have one of these writs, and in addition to having to be protective of the information, because of that, we don't want to do anything that would in any way undermine anything like that. You're going to walk them out. Staff, the rest of the staff's in the courtroom. You can imagine it takes everybody involved to do any part of this, especially with a small office. And I'm grateful to have the quality of folks that we do to fill up and do justice. All right, do y'all have any questions you can ask me or Lisa, or we going to try to put the ranger on the spot?
Yes, with this, with the latest with Riggs, can we officially say that the Kentucky Fried Chicken murder is officially closed right now, or is there still more investigation that needs to be done?
I'm going to start with that. There'll always be more investigation, always. However, this resolves the final biological material that we have. Lisa tells the point she says many times, the science had to catch up with the evidence for the victims to be able to tell their story. We're there.
I would say there are still follow-ups that are being done, but as far as identifying anyone else involved in these murders, I do not have any belief that we will identify anyone other than these three individuals.
Did Devin Riggs have any relation to the other two convicted suspects?
We're still working on that. That's still part of the follow-up investigations that we're going to do. We have learned that they're, from the genealogy, that they had familial connections in the North Tyler area. We're following up on that, but we wanted to get this out here as quickly as we could.
There are some other possible connections. Ranger Hamadi was working in the field all week on that, but we just don't have enough to really feel confident addressing your question in any sort of detail.
So, is there evidence, I'm sorry, Jolie Ferguson with the Logging News Journal. Is there evidence that these three worked together on other crimes?
We're still working on that.
And is there the reason that he was in East Texas and then in California? What were those connections?
There was family out in California, we learned. That California looked like it was more the home place. We don't yet, and it looks like there was a lot of back and forth between California and East Texas. That was 40 some odd years ago, so we're still working on that.
So for years, we were told that it was two men that went inside the Kentucky Fried Chicken on that night. The third person, do we know if they worked together in that moment, or did they meet, because we know they traveled all the way to Russ County.
There are 5 people that can tell you that, and they obviously can't speak. There are 3 other people, 2 of whom can't speak, and 1 of whom refuses to speak. So we don't have any way to know. It's unfortunate in any crime. I've never had a crime where I knew exactly how it went down. You just can't. And I wish we knew. What we know is I can't tell you how many people are inside the restaurant, and I can't tell you how many were at the murder scene. I can tell you that the DNA of 2 of the people is inside the restaurant, and the DNA of 1 of the people is at the murder scene. I can tell you that Darnell Hartsfield had access to a cargo van, and there was a cargo van seen at the scene. I know that Devin Riggs had access to a cargo van and used a cargo van. I know that there was a 357 that they both had access to. I know that Darnell Hartsfield was a robber, as was. And so there's lots of different things, but can we ever know exactly what happened? No.
Do you think that, you mentioned he's not speaking, Mr. Pinkerton. Do you think that later on that could be a follow-up if we do get new details, that y'all would try again to go back to him to try to verify any of this, or no?
I will always try. I did not believe he would speak to us to start with, nor did Lisa or some of the other people involved. Just do not believe that he will. These questions you're raising are the questions we all want to know. We sit across from victims' families. She's a professional prosecutor. This is what we do, is we deal with murder and sexual assault and all these horrible things. And so many times victims sit across from us and they want to know why. Why did my loved one have to suffer like this? There's never a good answer. Even when we get to an answer, it's not a satisfactory answer. And that's the best that I can give you. We don't have an answer if other than a robbery gone wrong is what we've always assumed. That's what the evidence tells us. We have to make our assumptions based on the evidence and regional inferences from that evidence. And that's what it's telling us as far as a greater why. Other than it's a broken world and there's evil in this world, that's the only answer I can give you.
Ma'am, you mentioned a gnawing feeling just over the years looking for this third person. What was that feeling like, and has it subsided now that you've come to an answer?
Well, it's obviously a relief because my great fear was there was somebody out there that was doing things like this again, and a gnawing frustration of the amount of work that we put into trying to figure out who this person was. I can't possibly describe to you. It was the greatest and biggest search that our investigators have ever engaged in. I mean, I just told you, 231 people we eliminated. And it wasn't just, hey, give me your DNA. There were any number of ways. We went to places out of state. So it was, my investigator told me just the other day that the greatest disappointment of her career is that we didn't figure out who this was before the genealogy. I understand now why we didn't, and I accept now why we didn't, but I really hoped that we'd be able to. But I am, as I've said, forever grateful for the science and forever grateful for the Rangers for taking the ball and running with it and getting us this. I couldn't be happier about that.
I want to say that so many things that went right. Ranger Shea, we really thought that we were out of the sample that we were using to develop the DNA profile from this subject, from Devin Riggs. And the ranger went back to that sample with the people from the laboratory and was able to develop another profile, which of course was Devin Riggs, and that's the one that ultimately led us here. So been some amazing science involved in this. And Ms. Tanner, she teaches these courses, and it still gets ahead of us, and we learn it more and more as we go through. So this is, KFC cases have been at the cutting edge in terms of forensic science from the very start.
Mr. Tanner, with the way DNA has evolved now, will y'all continue to be able to take old evidence and go back and redo it just to see if you can come up with any more information, maybe any more evidence?
You certainly can based on today's technology, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't get better. I can't imagine that it's not going to keep getting better. So I hope so.
So where was his DNA in a database that y'all were able to connect to?
Genealogy databases. It wasn't, so you have databases that are the offender databases. In Texas, the acronym is CODIS, and each state has one. And he was not in any of the offender databases, which is what we searched over all these years since 2003, over and over and over. And we would search the other states' databases over and over, have the lab do it over and over and over. He wasn't in any of those. The genealogy databases, with all of the things, all of us who go to Ancestry and 23andMe and all of that, and Ranger Shea can probably answer this for you better, there are genealogy databases out there that are not offender related, that allow them to get a start and put the DNA in and look and then narrow it down. These are all databases that are for narrowing down. So you narrow it down and go, okay, I can tell it's this familial line, and then I'm going to look at it, and then I can narrow it down from there, and then I can go this angle and cut this limb off, and I'm going to go down this limb. And so it's the genealogy databases that led to it. Now, they were able to use traditional DNA testing on Billy Ray Riggs, get a sample from his body, test it against it, and so they could tell it was not his, but it was that of a full brother of his. Then that narrowed us down to either Devin Riggs or Larry, and so they got DNA from a family member of Larry, got him eliminated, and so then that narrowed us down only to Devin.
Okay. I have another question too, please, sorry.
It's okay.
So all of this finally puts to definite rest that a man named Jimmy Mankins was never involved in this crime. Now, he was involved in other crimes, but not this one.
Jimmy Mankins certainly didn't help himself. I think we can all agree with that. But Jimmy Mankins, as I told two different juries, was absolutely innocent of this crime. He had absolutely nothing to do with it. We knew that in 1995, and everything we've learned since then has just solidified it. No, he certainly, nobody's going to say that Jimmy Mankins Jr. was a saint, but he was not a Kentucky Fried Chicken murderer.
Let me chime in on that too, because I got it the other day in the feed store. I'll get it out at Walmart. I'll hear it again later in the week. we're 100% certain he had nothing to do with the KFC murders and robbery. Certain from the science. The science does not support any sort of a link to him in any manner at all.
And he's deceased now?
He is.
So is there anything that, I mean, he has family too. And is there anything that will be done now or should be done to, I don't know, I mean, make that right?
I can only speak from my tenure in 21 years. This office never prosecuted him. Now, there was the prosecution from the AG's office before, but they dismissed that.
I will tell you that this, where Jimmy Earl Mankins is concerned, is not a new development.
Right.
I sat down in a law office across the street in 2006 with him, just across the table from him, and I told him, Jim Earl, I know you didn't do this, and I'm going to defend you in front of this jury coming up, and I will continue to defend you. So this is not a new development, it's just further solidification of that fact.
Let me go so far as to say, in the entire 21st century, nobody in any sort of authority in regard to the investigation or the prosecution has ever been of the opinion that Jimmy Earl Mankins was involved. We're of the opinion he was not. That was literally last century in the 20th century when he was being reviewed, and it was a mistake. It was a mistake based on that fingernail that took him down the wrong path for a very long time. That was Mary Tyler's fingernail the entire time. We just needed the science to tell us that. And really, there were, for some reasons that Ms. Tanner pointed out, that you shouldn't have gone down that path. Just shouldn't have.
And if it makes anyone feel better, I can explain more of why we know the DNA, or the fingernail is not that of Mankins, separate and apart from the DNA, because fine, I don't know if you want to know, or it's a dead horse and we just keep picking it.
I mean, because every time this case is mentioned, his name gets mentioned.
Sure, and that is, I guess, not unexpected, because he was the suspect that, of course, it was a sexy suspect because of his family stature here in the community, and I get that. And he was the suspect initially. Unfortunately, it was based on an error. That separate and apart from the DNA, obviously the DNA told us at the time what nobody wanted to hear. But going back and looking at it in hindsight, there was a lot of other stuff that just kind of make you slap your head and go, oh God, why didn't somebody see this back at the beginning? For instance, one of the things that struck me most of all was that, and I know those of us who follow this case, I'm sure everyone's seen the pictures of the fingernail, and they've seen the pictures of the plaster cast of his finger and how his finger looked. One of the initial things when I started to work on the case was like, wait a minute, when did he get talked to when they took the plaster cast of the finger? It was 8 days after the crime. And I thought to myself, but don't fingernails grow? And so we actually, one of the deliberative bodies that I worked with in this case, we did an experiment. This isn't official, but I want to tell you because it's pretty relevant. We did an experiment where I got fingernail clippers and I cut my fingernail down to the very quick where it was just right on the verge of bleeding. And we bandaged it up so nobody could see it. And we waited for 8 days. And we did a big reveal. And you know what happened? My fingernail grew. And it was normal looking. It wasn't cut down to the quick. And so we were all like, wait a minute, that nail shouldn't have looked the way it looked if that was from the crime. And if that was in fact his fingernail. Another thing that was huge was immediately before I don't remember if it was the Hartsfield or the Pinkerton trial, but immediately before one of the two trials, Missy, my investigator, and I were going through all of the physical evidence. And we were looking at the various samples that were collected at autopsies, the various autopsies. And we came across a little envelope that was about this big, that little manila envelope, and on the outside of it, it was labeled. And the label said Mary Tyler's lab number, so it was Mary Tyler's autopsy, and it said broken fingernail on the broken thumbnail across the envelope. She and I opened the envelope, and it had obviously never been opened since autopsy. And we opened it up, and there was a little piece of paper that we unfolded carefully, the piece of paper. You know what we found inside of it? We found 4 very tiny, what were obviously female fingernails. You know what we didn't find inside of it? A thumbnail. The thumbnail was what everybody had been thinking was the Mankins thumbnail all those years, and it was just a mislabeled at autopsy that never got caught. And as soon as we saw that, we went, oh my God, it's been there all along, nobody looked. And it was just those 4 little fingernails in there and no thumbnail. So, I mean, those are the little things, and then along with the first DNA that told us it's not his nail, the second DNA that told us it's not his nail, I have absolutely no doubt at all, never will, that if something comes along separately to tell us that somehow Jim Mankin somehow did this, okay, fine, but it has absolutely nothing to do with that matter. Period. Hard stop.
He did not do this, but based on the evidence, and you know, I just want to add that you point out, and you know, certainly don't ever want people to have to be charged with a false allegation, family members and things like that. But it's also been a false allegation. It's done a lot of harm to our law enforcement agencies and our Rush County community and our integrity and our legitimacy as a government. For so many times, this wild story, wild but really, it really sold. It's like a movie of the week of all of this cover-up and corruption to protect this individual, and it really made us all look suspect and reduced all of our credibility and legitimacy in the law enforcement community in Rush County. It has hung over our head like a cloud, and it's been a cloud that should have been removed at least 30 years ago. Really should have been removed from the very start. We shouldn't have had to deal with it. I've never been down that path since my tenure, since '05, since Lisa Tanner and I returned those first grand jury indictments, and you saw us out here with the current governor, with the attorney general at that time. We started on this path. That has been something that we have tried to knock down and defeat every time it has come forward, because it is not based on evidence. It's based on gossip, innuendo, hearsay, and like I say, a story that just keeps getting bigger and told and added more and more to, but it's entirely false. I guess I've been clear enough. I didn't mean to call you out. I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to address the question.
But so that means it was that misdirection or that kept this case from being solved 40 years ago.
True.
Yes.
True. I will tell you that I will never forget a meeting that we had, and I'll see you over here in the jury box will remember it, where we had our first meeting in 2001 or 2, where we laid out to the families that we believed Jim Mankin was innocent, and that Darna Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton, at that time we didn't know about the third person, were the ones who were responsible. And needless to say, there was skepticism. Needless to say, there was less than a receptive audience at first. And what I will never forget is the moment I showed the families the wanted for questioning poster that was generated in the first week of after this crime, that had the pictures of Darnell Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton on it. And you could feel the air leave blue. It was one of those moments in my life that I will never forget how that felt. And I watched family members start to cry because they realized what we had already come to realize, which is these guys were here all along. We just didn't have the capacity to know.
May I ask why were they not pursued?
It would appear that it was very, very shortly after Mr. Mankins was talked to, and he was found to have a torn fingernail, and there was a hard right turn.
There was other things along with that. I believe Mr. Pinkerton claimed that he was in prison at the time. He was actually out, but it wasn't like today where we could look that up on the internet. They would have to call down there and get a clerk, and then they'd have to try to pull a file, and they'd have to get the right place. And so it became more complicated, and so there was a similar kind of situation with Mr. Hartsfield where they started to believe that he wasn't involved based on his assertions when they interviewed him. And then from that, as Ms. Tanner said, that's when they have the Mankins and the fingernail issue and all of that, and they just go, frankly, down the wrong path. And they had them right then. They had them right then is what's so frustrating. But it's easy for us to sit up here and say that in hindsight because now the science has vindicated that they did have them the whole time. And thanks to Ranger Elliott, we had that wanted poster. And that was prepared, I believe, with some information from the Smith County Sheriff at that time.
Yes.
From some sources we don't know, but he'd gotten some sources in the jail that these were the people responsible. So it had a lot of support behind it, just didn't work out. Kathy?
Did anybody ever think to call the parole office and double check and see if they?
We did.
Yeah, but I mean, the parole officers are such a good source. And I know back then, TC, they weren't caught up. It would take weeks sometimes for it to show that somebody had been released. And I know the two men that wound up supervising both of them. And,
I can't speak to, I mean, I don't know.
parole officers are excellent sort of resources.
I don't know what was done back then.
Yeah.
I know that we nailed it down pretty quickly.
Well, I just wondered if it said anything in the file about that.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that it was like genealogical DNA used. Why was it not offensive DNA if he had been arrested before and would hypothetically then have a record?
Because just because you have a record doesn't mean your DNA gets taken. You have to, your offense has to qualify, and that's changed over the years. What qualifies for mandatory DNA collection has gotten to be much bigger now than it used to be. And in California, I don't know specifically what their laws are, but I know that their laws were such that nothing he ever did got him into their database. I wish he would have been. I wish to goodness he would have been, like more than 10, 15 years ago.
And then you said yesterday you kind of notified the family ahead of time of who it was. Walk me through how did they react?
They were ecstatic. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of happiness. And to be honest, I think there was a certain amount of relief that he was gone so that they didn't have to worry about another trial. But it's been very special these folks are family to me. And it was very special to be able to call them all again after all this time. Rekindle our friendship and our family relationship and let them know that, no, nobody stopped working. Folks have been working. And so it's very, very special.
And they feel like they have an obligation to their loved ones to keep moving the case forward. So, and bless their heart, we're all getting older. When we started this, we were out on those steps. I didn't have any gray hair. So we're all, time catches up with all of us. And it was really hitting home with some of them. Bless their hearts. They did not want to leave this world not knowing that they had done everything they could to uncover justice for their loved ones. And they have a clean heart in that regard. And we're certainly pleased to be here today standing with them and telling you what we know.
Y'all shared that same, Lisa, you told me, you shared me all this stuff 2018, 2019 when I met you, and filled me in on this whole story. You talked about how this was the most important thing you've ever done, and there was a lot of things that got, fell through the cracks, hard right turns. When you found out that this Devin guy was the third suspect, and you looked into it, and you found out that it came to an end because he had passed. You spent a majority of your life doing all this. How did that make each and every one of you feel? You said the families was ecstatic because they didn't have to pursue it anymore. How did that make you guys feel, knowing that you've been trying to seek answers for these families?
Really gratifying. Odd because my entire professional career, I first became involved in this case in 1994. So my entire professional career just about has had KFC flowing through it. So it's very odd, but it's very, very gratifying. I will tell you, I'm a trial lawyer, and nothing makes me happier than trying. The older the case, the better. And so I was deeply disappointed from a trial lawyer standpoint that he was no longer with us, so I could bring him to justice here in the state of Texas. But I also completely understood from the family's perspective how they would be relieved that he's not here anymore. But it was very, very gratifying, and as I said, I'll be forever grateful to the Rangers for taking the lead on this for us.
I was a kid in school. I remember who told me about it. This was back before 9/11, all these other things that we see in the world that are so terrible. And it really, like I say, it really pierced through the community that this kind of evil could strike right in the middle of us for no reason. So, and then the cloud in terms of law enforcement that hung over all of us and our legitimacy, that we were somehow corrupt or incompetent or something like that. And that was such a poor brush to get painted with, because so many of these folks behind me worked so hard. So many of them have gone to their graves, never seeing the end of this. It's just been such an ordeal for the people of this county, for our law enforcement community that's been painted with a bad brush, and they have done everything they could to bring justice about and lift this. So what a blessing. What a blessing to come into the office Monday and not have this over us. I know it's not a closure in that way to the victims' families, because they have forever lost their loved ones, and we can't do anything to reduce or diminish that. But we know that we have fulfilled our duty as a county, as a community, as a state of Texas, as law enforcement officers and prosecutors, do everything we could to bring about justice. And so I join Lisa. There's so many people to be grateful for, but I'm very grateful for Ranger Shea and the excellent work he did to get us this most recent development.
I'd just like to say, I wasn't being critical or anything.
No.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate each and every one.
And please understand that when we're talking about missteps in the beginning, I mean nothing negative
Right. Oh,
towards
no,
any
I
of these
understand.
nice people.
But
They've worked their rears off, and
I went to school with, David was a year younger than me, and he marched right beside me in band. And my brother and him were really good friends, and then Kathy and I became really good friends. And the Maxwell family means a lot to me. And I saw the toll it took on them. I saw the toll it took on Danny Parker. We became friends over the years, and I saw him just tired, but didn't want to give up. And I can't tell you what it means to me, all the effort that's been put into this case. And I personally really, really appreciate each and every one of you. And y'all sure don't get the thanks that y'all all deserve, and nobody knows what it's like to be a police officer and not be able to put things to bed at night. So I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because it became part of my life. So, Amen. Thank you.
Anything else? Bruce, would you take our victims out? And I'm going to ask y'all to remain for just a little while and let them get out and get to their cars and things. And I'm going to have my staff come forward and hand out these cards that we've got for the media for y'all to give out.